Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the marble halls of Persepolis, where you're about to witness the most audacious royal love scandal in ancient history. You're standing in Queen Atossa's private chambers, watching her pace across Persian rugs worth more than entire cities, and you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this palace. One wrong glance at the wrong person could literally cost you your head. If you enjoy strange, sleepy history, hit like and subscribe. It helps me make more of these late night time travels. Tell me your city and what time you're listening. I always check the comments and love seeing where in the world you're drifting off. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, and let's slide into tonight's story about a queen who chose love over an empire. You're in the year 500 BC, and the Persian Empire stretches from India to Greece, the largest empire the world has ever seen. You smell frankincense burning in golden braziers, hear the soft whisper of silk against marble as Queen Atossa moves through her chambers. She's not just any queen, she's the daughter of Cyrus the Great, sister to one emperor and now wife to another, Darius the Great himself. But here's the thing historians still argue about. Was she truly the most powerful woman in the ancient world, or the most trapped? You watch her fingers trace the intricate carvings on her ivory window screen. Through the latte work, she can see the sprawling capital of Persepolis, with its soaring columns and gold-leaf terraces. 23 provinces send tribute here. Babylonians, Egyptians, Indians, they all bow to her husband's throne. And yet, as you observe her restless movements, you realize she's as much a prisoner as she is a ruler. The Persian court operates on a principle that would make modern relationships look simple. Royal marriages aren't about love. They're about bloodlines, alliances, and keeping the empire from fragmenting into civil war. You see, Atossa married her half-brother Cambyses first, then after his death, she was passed to another royal family member, then finally to Darius when he seized the throne. It sounds horrifying to us, but this was standard Persian royal protocol, keeping the divine bloodline pure and the political alliances tight. But tonight, you notice something different in her movements. There's an urgency, a nervous energy that has nothing to do with imperial politics. You follow her gaze through that ivory screen, and you spot him, a young Persian nobleman standing by the palace fountain, pretending to examine the bronze lions that spout perfumed water. His name is Artabazus, and he's about to turn the Persian Empire upside down. You watch Atossa's hands shake slightly as she adjusts her golden diadem. The weight of empire literally rests on her head. The crown contains emeralds from Scythia, pearls from the Persian Gulf, and gold mined by slaves in the far reaches of the empire. But right now, you can tell she'd trade it all for 5 minutes alone with the man by the fountain. This is where our story really begins, not with armies or conquests, but with a glance between two people who were never supposed to look at each other that way. The Persian court has rules about everything: how many steps behind the king a queen must walk, which days she can speak in public, even how she's supposed to breathe in the presence of foreign ambassadors. But nobody wrote rules about what happens when a queen falls in love with someone who isn't her royal husband. You sense the danger crackling through the palace air like electricity before a thunderstorm. Persian law is brutally clear about adultery in the royal family. It's not just a crime, it's treason against the empire itself. The punishment isn't exile or divorce, it's death, often preceded by creative torture methods that would make medieval executioners take notes. As you watch Atossa finally turn away from the window, you see her make a decision that will echo through Persian history. Tomorrow, she'll begin planning the most elaborate deception ever attempted by ancient royalty. She's going to fake her own death, disappear from history, and nearly bring down the greatest empire in the world, all for love. You're now moving deeper into the women's quarters of the Persian palace, a world so isolated that most Persian men, even nobles, never see it. You slip through corridors lined with silk tapestries, depicting hunting scenes and royal victories, following Atossa as she navigates what historians call the most luxurious prison ever constructed. The air smells like rosewater and saffron, and you can hear the soft chiming of gold jewellery with every step. This is the world Persian royal women inhabited, beautiful, wealthy, and completely cut off from reality. You pass chambers where other royal wives spend their days weaving on golden looms, playing board games with ivory pieces, and competing in poetry contests that nobody outside these walls will ever hear. It's like a five-star resort designed by someone who never intended the guests to leave. You watch Atossa pause before a polished bronze mirror, and you realise she's staring at a woman who technically owns half the known world but can't choose what to eat for breakfast. Persian royal protocol dictates everything. Her meals are chosen by court nutritionists, her clothes selected by ceremonial dressers, even her conversations monitored by female attendants who report directly to the king's intelligence network. Privacy, as we understand it, simply doesn't exist. The Persian system of royal seclusion makes medieval European courts look like progressive democracies. You see attendants whose sole job is to taste Atossa's food, not just for poison, but to ensure it meets royal dietary laws that were supposedly handed down from Ahura Mazda himself. Other servants exist only to carry messages, arrange her jewellery, or maintain the complex ventilation system that keeps these chambers at perfect temperature year-round. But here's what's fascinating, and what historians still argue about. This isolation was supposed to protect royal women, not imprison them. Persian philosophy held that royal wives were too sacred to be contaminated by common interaction. They were living goddesses, essentially, preserved in perfection for the divine king's pleasure. In theory, it was the ultimate honour. In practice, you can see the psychological toll written across Atossa's face. You follow her to a private garden courtyard, one of the few spaces where royal women can experience actual sunlight. The garden is a marvel. Pomegranate trees heavy with fruit, roses that bloom year-round thanks to an ingenious irrigation system, and peacocks that wander freely across manicured lawns. But even here, you notice the ivory screens that ensure no unauthorized eyes can glimpse the queen. The irony hits you as you watch Atossa feed breadcrumbs to a caged songbird. She's got more freedom than most women in the ancient world, and less freedom than almost any human being alive. She commands servants, influences policy through whispered conversations with her husband, and wears jewellery that could fund entire armies, but she can't walk down a street, choose her own friends, or, and this is the crucial part, fall in love with anyone besides her royal husband. You observe her daily routine, and it's both fascinating and suffocating. Morning prayers at a private fire altar, where Zoroastrian priests conduct abbreviated ceremonies just for the royal women. Breakfast served on plates made from single pieces of carved jade. Educational sessions where Greek tutors, carefully castrated to ensure no romantic complications, teach literature, mathematics, and philosophy. Afternoon music lessons on instruments carved from rare woods and strung with silk. The entertainment would make Roman emperors jealous. Private theatrical performances, imported exotic animals, libraries containing scrolls from every corner of the known world. But you notice how Atossa's attention wanders during even the most spectacular displays. A troupe of Indian dancers performs, musicians play compositions written specifically for royal ears, and she's staring past them at the garden walls, calculating distances and possibilities. Persian royal women weren't completely powerless. That's a common misconception. You see Atossa reviewing architectural plans for new palace wings, approving religious donations that could feed entire cities, and consulting with spies who report on affairs throughout the empire. Queen mothers especially wielded enormous behind-the-scenes influence, but all of this power came with a price: complete personal subordination to imperial needs. The clothing alone tells the story. You watch servants dress Atossa in layers that take an hour to arrange properly. Silk undergarments, an embroidered robe that weighs 30 pounds, jewellery so elaborate it requires architectural planning to distribute the weight. She looks magnificent and moves like someone carrying invisible chains. As evening approaches, you see her dismiss her attendants with careful politeness. This is the moment she's been waiting for all day, 10 minutes of genuine solitude before the dinner ceremonies begin. You watch her walk to that ivory window screen again, and you realise that tomorrow this golden cage will be empty. The most pampered prisoner in the ancient world is about to attempt the most dangerous escape in Persian history. You're crouched behind a marble column in the palace's midnight garden, watching the most dangerous flirtation in Persian history unfold. It's 3 days before Atossa's planned death, and you're witnessing the secret meetings that started this whole impossible romance. The garden got its name because it only blooms at night, jasmine and moonflowers, designed to create the perfect romantic atmosphere, though the Persian architects definitely didn't intend it for adultery. You see Artabazus first, moving through the shadows like he's done this 100 times before. He's not some random palace guard or stable boy. This guy is Persian nobility, which makes everything infinitely more complicated and dangerous. His family controls 3 provinces, commands their own armies, and traces their bloodline back to the first Persian kings. In other words, if this affair gets discovered, it won't just be a royal scandal, it'll be a civil war. The meeting spot is brilliant in its simplicity. There's a fountain dedicated to Anahita, the Persian goddess of love and fertility, positioned perfectly where 2 garden paths cross. Anyone spotted here can claim they're making religious offerings, completely innocent. Except you can tell from Artabazus's nervous pacing that tonight's offering has nothing to do with prayers. You watch Atossa approach from the opposite direction, and historians still argue about how she managed these escapes from the women's quarters. The most likely theory involves bribing night guards with gold jewellery worth more than their annual salaries. But some scholars think she had help from other royal wives who were living their own romantic fantasies through her rebellion. Either way, seeing a Persian queen walking alone at midnight is like spotting a unicorn. Theoretically impossible, practically happening right in front of you. The first thing that strikes you about their interaction is how genuinely awkward it is. These aren't experienced secret lovers. They're 2 people who've spent their entire lives surrounded by servants, protocols, and people who tell them exactly what to say in every situation. Watching them try to have a normal conversation is like watching aliens attempt human small talk. Artabazus starts with what sounds like a formal court greeting, complete with the proper hand gestures and everything. Atossa responds with equally formal courtesy. You're thinking this might be the most polite adultery in ancient history until she reaches out and touches his hand, and suddenly the Persian Empire's most rigid social rules evaporate like morning mist. The conversation, when you can catch fragments of it, reveals just how impossible their situation really is. Artabazus mentions his upcoming assignment to govern a distant province, standard Persian practice to keep noble families from getting too comfortable in the capital. Atossa talks about her ceremonial duties, the endless religious festivals where she has to stand perfectly still for hours, while priests chant in languages she doesn't understand. They're both trapped in golden cages, just different shapes. But here's where it gets interesting and dangerous. You overhear them discussing something that sounds like military intelligence, troop movements, provincial tax revenues, disputes between regional governors. This isn't just a romantic affair. They're sharing state secrets. In Persian law, that elevates their crime from adultery to high treason, which carries penalties that would make executioners in other empires look merciful. The physical attraction is obvious, but you realise there's something deeper happening here. These are 2 of the most isolated people in the Persian Empire, finding someone who actually understands their world. Artabazus knows what it's like to smile politely while planning someone's destruction. Atossa understands the weight of making decisions that affect thousands of lives. They're not just falling in love, they're finding the only other person alive who speaks their particular language of power and loneliness. You notice how they've developed their own communication system. A certain way of arranging her jewellery sends messages about when they can meet. His position during court ceremonies indicates whether it's safe or dangerous. They're conducting a romancing code right under the noses of the Persian Empire's extensive spy network. The garden meetings have been going on for 2 months, according to whispered fragments you catch. Long enough for real emotional attachment, not long enough for anyone to notice patterns. But tonight feels different. There's an urgency, a finality to their conversation that suggests major changes coming. You watch Atossa pull something from her robes, a small golden amulet that you recognise as part of the royal regalia. She's giving him a piece of jewellery that literally belongs to the Persian crown, which is either the most romantic gesture in ancient history or evidence of the most elaborate theft ever attempted against an empire. As they prepare to part ways, you see them embrace with the desperate intensity of people who know this might be their last chance. The moonlight catches the tears on Atossa's face, and you realise that tomorrow, when she begins faking her death, she won't just be escaping her marriage. She'll be abandoning the only life she's ever known, the only identity she's ever had, for a love that could destroy both their families and destabilise an empire. The Persian Empire has survived invasions, rebellions, and natural disasters. But watching these two people say goodbye, you sense something that even Darius the Great never anticipated. The empire is about to face an enemy it has no weapons against. Love. You're now eavesdropping on the most venomous conversation in Persian palace history, hidden behind silk curtains in the Hall of Whispers, where court officials conduct their daily character assassinations. 3 rival courtiers have gathered at dawn, and they're discussing Queen Atossa with a kind of cold calculation that topples dynasties. The irony isn't lost on you. While Atossa plots her romantic escape, her enemies are plotting her actual destruction. The leader of this particular poison committee is Gobryas, Darius's cousin and master of palace intelligence. You watch him pace across marble floors inlaid with scenes of Persian military victories, and you can practically see the wheels turning in his political mind. He's noticed the same things you have: Atossa's distracted behaviour, her unexplained absences from court ceremonies, the way she startles when approached unexpectedly. But where you see a woman in love, he sees an opportunity for advancement. The second conspirator is Artaphernes, the royal treasurer, who's been keeping detailed records of every unusual expense in the palace. You listen as he lists items that sound innocent individually, but create a suspicious pattern. Extra payments to night guards, unusual orders for travelling supplies, mysterious purchases of common quality clothing that no royal woman should need. Historians still argue whether Artaphernes was genuinely concerned about security or just saw a chance to eliminate a rival for the king's attention. The third member of this deadly trio is Otanes, commander of the royal guard, and he's the one who worries you most. Where the others deal in whispers and speculation, he deals in evidence. You see him spread out what looks like a military campaign map, but instead of enemy territories, it shows guard stations, patrol routes, and timing schedules throughout the palace complex. He's been conducting surveillance worthy of a modern intelligence agency. Their conversation reveals just how closely Persian royal women were actually monitored, despite the illusion of pampered isolation. You learn about hidden observation posts, servants who double as informants, and an intricate system of cross-checking that makes modern security look amateur. Every time Atossa thought she was alone, at least 3 people were taking notes. But here's where it gets really dangerous. They're not just suspicious of adultery. Gobryas has a theory that Atossa is involved in something much more serious, a plot against Darius himself. The evidence sounds ridiculous at first, meet a queen planning to overthrow her own husband. But as you listen to their reasoning, it starts making terrifying sense from a paranoid Persian perspective. Persian royal succession was notoriously bloody and complicated. You hear them discuss historical precedents where royal wives poisoned their husbands to place their sons on the throne or allied with rival factions during succession crises. In their minds, a queen who's acting secretively must be planning something political, and in Persian politics, everything ultimately leads to assassination or civil war. The timing couldn't be worse for Atossa's romantic plans. You listen as Otan's reports increased tensions with Greek city-states, stirrings of rebellion in Egyptian provinces, and intelligence about potential assassination plots from displaced Persian nobles who lost power when Darius seized the throne. The empire is already on edge, and paranoia levels are reaching critical mass. Artaphrnes produces financial records that would make modern forensic accountants proud. He's traced gold payments, silk purchases, even exotic food orders that suggest someone is preparing for either extended travel or entertaining important guests in secret. What he's actually uncovered is evidence of Atossa's escape preparations, but he's interpreting it as proof of a broader conspiracy involving foreign agents and domestic traitors. You watch Gobrius smile with the satisfaction of someone who's just figured out how to destroy his enemies while advancing his own position. His plan is diabolically simple. Present their evidence to Darius not as proof of adultery, but as intelligence about a treasonous plot. Let the king draw his own conclusions about his wife's loyalty, then position themselves as the loyal defenders who uncovered the threat. The conversation takes an even darker turn when they start discussing what they call preemptive solutions. You realize they're not planning to expose Atossa's affair. They're planning to eliminate her before she can execute whatever plot they think she's planning. In their minds, they're saving the empire from internal collapse. In reality, they're about to commit regicide based on romantic gossip and paranoid speculation. Persian court politics operated on the principle that it's better to destroy 10 innocent people than let one guilty person escape. You see this philosophy playing out in real time as they plan Atossa's destruction with the same methodical precision that built the Persian Empire. They're not evil exactly, they genuinely believe they're protecting Darius and preserving imperial stability. The meeting ends with them scheduling individual audiences with the king over the next few days. Each will present pieces of their manufactured evidence, letting Darius connect the dots himself. It's a masterpiece of political manipulation. By the time they're finished, Darius will think discovering his wife's treason was his own brilliant deduction. As you watch them leave through separate exits to avoid suspicion, you realize that Atossa's fake death plan isn't just romantic desperation. It might be the only thing that saves her life. These three men are about to convince the most powerful ruler in the ancient world that his beloved wife is plotting his assassination. In 3 days, when Atossa dies of mysterious illness, they'll probably celebrate their successful intervention against a treasonous queen. The Persian Empire is about to witness the perfect storm, a queen faking her death for love, while her enemies celebrate what they think is their successful murder plot. Even you can't predict how this collision of deception and paranoia will end. You're standing in the throne room of Persepolis as Darius the Great receives the most devastating news of his reign, though he doesn't know it yet. The morning sun streams through windows, positioned to make the king appear divinely illuminated, but today the light only emphasizes the shock and grief transforming his face. You're watching a master of the ancient world learn that his wife, the woman who shares his bed, his throne, and his empire, is dying of a mysterious wasting disease. The royal physician, a Greek named Democedes, who's treated everyone from Spartan warriors to Babylonian priests, delivers the diagnosis with the kind of grave authority that ends discussions. You see him gesture toward Atossa's chambers, explaining symptoms that sound genuinely terrifying. High fever, delirium, and a strange paralysis that's spreading through her limbs. What you know, and Darius doesn't, is that these symptoms are being produced by a carefully orchestrated combination of herbal preparations, theatrical makeup, and acting worthy of the greatest Greek dramatists. Darius's reaction tells you everything about their relationship that court gossip never captured. This isn't political grief or the calculated sorrow of a man losing a strategic alliance. You watch the Persian Empire's most feared ruler crumble like a man who's just lost half his soul. His hands shake as he demands every physician in the empire be summoned immediately. He offers rewards that could fund entire cities to anyone who can cure his queen. The timing of Atossa's illness is perfect from a deception standpoint, and you realize she's been planning this moment for months. Persian royal protocol requires the king to maintain public dignity during family crises, but it also mandates that he show appropriate concern for his divine queen's health. Darius can't appear too emotional. That would suggest weakness that enemies might exploit. But he also can't appear unconcerned without seeming impious toward the gods, who supposedly bless their union. You follow Darius as he rushes to Atossa's chambers, and the performance you witness there deserves its own place in theatrical history. Atossa lies on a bed carved from a single piece of Lebanese cedar, covered in silk sheets that cost more than most people's houses, looking convincingly near death. Her skin has an unnatural pallor that you now realize comes from powdered pearls mixed with white lead, dangerous beauty techniques that Persian court women normally used in tiny amounts, but she's applied liberally to achieve a deathly complexion. The symptoms she's mimicking are based on genuine accounts of a plague that swept through the western provinces 5 years earlier. Historians still argue whether she researched this herself or had medical help, but watching her performance suggests someone with detailed knowledge of how diseases actually progress. She's not just playing sick, she's recreating a specific illness that physicians will recognize but can't cure. Darius kneels beside her bed, something Persian kings literally never do for anyone, and you hear him make promises that would reshape the ancient world if anyone took them seriously. He offers to build temples to every god in the Persian pantheon if they'll spare Atossa's life. He promises to cancel all taxes for a year throughout the empire. He even swears to free every slave in the royal household, which would cost the imperial treasury millions of gold pieces. The court officials gathering around the sickbed don't know whether to be touched by their king's devotion or terrified by his apparent willingness to bankrupt the empire for one woman. You see Gobryas and his co-conspirators exchanging meaningful looks. In their paranoid minds, this emotional display probably confirms their suspicions about Atossa's dangerous influence over imperial policy. Persian medicine in 500 BC was actually quite advanced, combining Greek rational inquiry with Babylonian astronomical theory and Indian surgical techniques. You watch physicians examine Atossa with procedures that wouldn't be out of place in a medieval European court, checking her pulse, examining her urine, consulting astronomical charts to determine whether planetary alignments might be affecting her health. The problem is, she's not actually sick, so their treatments can't work, which only makes the situation appear more dire. You're witnessing the most expensive fake funeral in ancient history, standing among thousands of mourners who have no idea they're grieving an empty golden sarcophagus. The Persian Empire has mobilized resources that could fund entire wars to honor their dead queen, and you're watching Darius transform his heartbreak into a spectacle that makes Roman imperial funerals look like modest family gatherings. The preparation alone took 3 days and employed half the skilled craftsmen in Persepolis. You see them putting finishing touches on a funeral bier made from solid gold, decorated with emeralds from Scythia and pearls from the Persian Gulf. The sarcophagus itself is a masterpiece, carved from a single block of black marble and inlaid with precious metals depicting scenes from Atossa's life. What they don't know is that the only thing inside is a collection of silk cushions and aromatic herbs to maintain the illusion of weight. Persian royal funeral protocol makes modern state ceremonies look improvised. You watch as priests from every major religion in the empire gather to conduct overlapping ceremonies, ensuring that whatever gods might exist are properly informed about Atossa's journey to the afterlife. Zoroastrian fire altars burn continuously, Greek physicians offer libations to Asclepius, and Babylonian astronomers calculate the precise moment when celestial alignments will be most favourable for the Queen's soul. The guest list reads like a directory of ancient world power. You see Egyptian governors who travelled for weeks to attend, Greek diplomats representing city-states that are technically Persian enemies, and Indian princes who brought entire entourages of musicians and dancers. Attending Queen Atossa's funeral isn't just paying respects, it's a mandatory demonstration of loyalty to the Persian Empire. Missing this event would be interpreted as a political statement that could trigger military retaliation. Darius himself has transformed grief into imperial theatre. You watch him perform mourning rituals that require him to appear devastated while maintaining the dignity befitting the ruler of the known world's greatest empire. He's had his beard cut in the Persian style of mourning. He wears robes of undyed wool instead of his usual gold-threaded silk, and he moves with the carefully controlled sorrow of someone performing grief for political necessity. But here's what makes you realise: this isn't entirely performance. Darius genuinely loved Atossa, which makes her deception simultaneously more romantic and more cruel. You see moments when his grief breaks through royal protocol, the way his hands shake when he touches the sarcophagus, how his voice cracks during the ceremonial speeches, the tears he can't quite control during the religious rites. He's not just mourning a political ally, he's losing the woman he actually chose to love, in a world where royal marriages were typically strategic arrangements. The funeral procession stretches for miles through Persepolis, and you realise this is also serving as an impressive demonstration of Persian power to foreign observers. Every province in the empire has sent representatives carrying tribute: gold from Lydia, spices from India, rare woods from the Caucasus Mountains. What's supposed to be a funeral is actually turning into an accidental display of imperial wealth that will be reported back to potential enemies and allies throughout the ancient world. Persian burial customs required elaborate provisions for the afterlife, and you watch servants loading the funeral chamber with everything a queen might need in death. Jewellery worth more than most kingdoms' annual budgets, silk robes in every colour, scrolls containing Persian literature and royal genealogies, even miniature golden furniture for her eternal palace. The irony is that while they're burying these treasures with an empty coffin, Atossa is probably eating simple travel rations somewhere in the desert. The religious ceremonies reveal just how politically significant this death appears to be. You hear priests interpreting Atossa's illness as a divine warning about threats to the empire. Her death becomes a prophecy about necessary changes in imperial policy, dangers from foreign enemies, and the need for increased vigilance against internal rebellion. Without meaning to, her fake death is reshaping Persian political strategy based on completely fictional divine messages. Historians still argue about the costs of Atossa's funeral, but conservative estimates suggest Darius spent enough gold to maintain 3 full legions for an entire year. The funeral feast alone required slaughtering thousands of animals and importing delicacies from every corner of the known world. Wine flowed from golden fountains, musicians performed compositions written specifically for the occasion, and dancers recreated scenes from Persian mythology celebrating royal women who achieved divine status after death. The tomb they're sealing is an architectural marvel that would impress modern engineers. Built into a cliff face overlooking Persepolis, it's designed to be impregnable against grave robbers and erosion. Multiple chambers, complex ventilation systems, and enough structural reinforcement to survive earthquakes. They're creating a monument for the ages to house absolutely nothing except expensive pillows and aromatic wood chips. As the final ceremonies conclude and the tomb is sealed with massive stone blocks, you see Darius perform one last ritual that breaks your heart. He places his own royal signet ring inside the tomb, promising to join Atossa in death when his time comes. He's literally sealing away part of his imperial authority because he can't imagine ruling without the woman who's actually riding toward freedom with another man. The greatest empire in ancient history has just spent a fortune burying an empty box while their queen elopes with her lover. Persian efficiency at its finest, you think, watching the mourners disperse to spread news of this magnificent funeral throughout the ancient world, never knowing they've participated in the most successful fraud in royal history. You're now following the most elaborate smuggling operation in ancient history, creeping through underground tunnels beneath Persepolis that most people don't even know exist. While the Persian Empire mourns their queen above ground, you're witnessing the logistical miracle that's helping Atossa escape from her own tomb. The network of servants involved in this deception makes modern spy rings look like amateur operations. The mastermind of this underground railroad is Roxana, Atossa's head chambermaid, who's been planning escape routes with the precision of a military strategist. You watch her coordinate a team of conspirators that includes kitchen servants, stable hands, palace guards, and even a few minor priests, all bound together by either enormous bribes or genuine affection for their queen. What's fascinating is how they've turned the Persian Empire's own elaborate security systems against itself. The tunnel you're crawling through was originally built as an emergency escape route for the royal family during siege situations, but it hasn't been used in decades, and most current palace officials have forgotten it exists. Roxana discovered it while researching palace blueprints, and she spent months secretly clearing debris, stockpiling supplies, and mapping alternative exits. You realize she's been planning this escape longer than Atossa has been planning her fake death. Persian palace architecture is notoriously complex, designed to confuse potential assassins and invaders. But tonight that complexity is working in favor of the conspirators. You follow them through passages that connect the women's quarters to the royal stables, maintenance tunnels that lead to the city's water supply system, and forgotten chambers that were sealed during previous renovations. It's like navigating a three-dimensional maze designed by paranoid geniuses. The timing coordination would impress modern event planners. While Darius seals Atossa's tomb, she's actually being smuggled through the palace kitchen, disguised as a servant carrying laundry. You watch her transformation from Persian queen to common servant. Her elaborate hairstyles replaced by a simple head wrap. Her silk robes exchanged for rough cotton work clothes. Her royal jewellery hidden beneath layers of deliberately dirty fabric. The servant network has been practicing this operation for weeks, you realise, watching how smoothly they execute complex timing sequences. One group creates distractions in the main courtyard, while another moves Atossa through side passages. Kitchen servants time their deliveries to provide cover during vulnerable moments. Even the palace dogs have been conditioned to ignore unusual nighttime movement by receiving extra treats during practice runs. But here's what makes this escape truly brilliant. They're not just getting Atossa out of the palace, they're erasing evidence that she was ever sick in the first place. You see servants carefully disposing of the herbal preparations she used to fake symptoms, burning the special cosmetics that created her deathly appearance, and removing every trace of the elaborate medical theatre that convinced Persian physicians she was dying. The Persian Empire's communication system, normally its greatest strength, becomes a vulnerability during this operation. Messages about the Queen's death are being transmitted through official channels to every corner of the Empire, which means anyone who might spot Atossa in the next few weeks will assume they're seeing a ghost or a remarkable resemblance. The official story provides perfect cover for her escape. You follow them to a pre-positioned supply cache hidden in a maintenance chamber beneath the royal grain stores. The preparations reveal months of careful planning. Travel clothes suitable for a merchant woman, enough gold to fund a comfortable exile, forged travel documents claiming she's the widow of a Persian trader, and even carefully selected jewellery that's valuable but not recognisably royal. They've thought of everything except the emotional cost of abandoning her entire identity. The most dangerous part of the operation happens at the palace's outer perimeter, where loyal guards have been stationed specifically to prevent unauthorised departures during the mourning period. You watch Roxana execute a plan worthy of professional espionage. She's arranged for a minor kitchen fire that requires immediate attention from perimeter guards, creating exactly the window of opportunity needed for Atossa's escape. Persian security protocols assume that threats come from outside the empire, trying to get in, not from inside trying to get out. The entire palace defense system is designed to prevent invasion, assassination, and theft, but nobody planned for the possibility that a royal family member might want to simply disappear. This blind spot in their security becomes Atossa's salvation. As you follow the escape party through the final tunnel leading to the city's outskirts, you realise they're not just helping their queen escape, they're committing treason against the Persian Empire on a scale that would result in mass executions if discovered. Every servant involved is risking torture, death, and the destruction of their families. That they're doing it anyway suggests either remarkable loyalty to Atossa or remarkable faith in her ability to avoid capture. The tunnel emerges near a Persian military supply depot, which seems like the worst possible location for a clandestine escape until you realise it's actually perfect. Military zones have regular, predictable patrol patterns that can be timed and avoided. The constant movement of supply wagons provides cover for additional travellers. Most importantly, it's the last place anyone would expect to find a runaway queen. You watch Atossa pause at the tunnel exit, taking one last look toward the palace, where she spent her entire adult life. In a few hours, search parties will discover her empty tomb. Darius will assume grave robbers have desecrated his beloved wife's remains. The Persian Empire will mobilize resources to track down thieves who don't exist, while their former queen disappears into the desert with nothing but stolen identity documents and a heart full of impossible love. You're riding through the Persian desert at dawn, following Atossa and Artabazus toward their secret refuge, and you're starting to understand why ancient Persian poets wrote so passionately about the desert's deadly beauty. The landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. Rolling dunes that shift like golden ocean waves, rocky outcroppings that provide momentary shade, and a silence so complete it feels like the world has been abandoned by every living thing except the three of you. The hideaway they're heading toward is an oasis that technically doesn't exist on any Persian administrative maps, which makes it perfect for their purposes and explains how they've managed to prepare this refuge without attracting official attention. You learn that Artabazus discovered this place during a military campaign 3 years ago, when his unit got separated from the main Persian army during a sandstorm. What started as an emergency shelter has been gradually transformed into a secret paradise. The oasis appears suddenly, like something from Persian fairy tales, palm trees heavy with dates, a spring-fed pool that reflects the morning sky, and a collection of tents and simple buildings that represent the most luxurious camping expedition in ancient history. You realise that Artabazus has been using his provincial governor's resources to secretly stock this refuge for months. Technically, he's been embezzling from the Persian Empire to fund his own romantic hideaway, which is either incredibly romantic or spectacularly treasonous. The contrast between Atossa's former life and her current situation would be comical if it weren't so poignant. Yesterday she slept on silk sheets, in a bedroom larger than most temples, surrounded by servants who anticipated her every need. Today she's sharing a simple tent with her lover, cooking her own meals over an open fire and drawing her own water from the oasis spring. You watch her struggle with basic survival tasks that any common Persian woman would master as a child. But here's what surprises you. She seems genuinely happy for the first time since you've been observing her. The physical discomforts of desert life are nothing compared to the psychological relief of finally making her own choices. You see her laugh with pure joy when she successfully starts a cooking fire, something that would have been utterly beneath her dignity as a queen, but represents genuine achievement as a fugitive. Artabazus has prepared this hideaway with impressive attention to detail. Hidden supply caches contain enough food and water for several months. Emergency escape routes lead to secondary refuges deeper in the desert, and a sophisticated early warning system uses trained birds to alert them to approaching travelers. He's essentially created a private kingdom in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. The oasis itself is a natural wonder that would fascinate modern geologists. Underground springs create a microclimate that supports not just palm trees and grass, but flowering plants that attract birds and insects from hundreds of miles away. The water is so pure it tastes like it's been filtered through pearls, and the dates are sweeter than Persian royal confections. It's the kind of place that makes you understand why ancient people believed in paradise. Persian desert survival requires knowledge that's passed down through generations of nomadic tribes, and you realize Artabazus has been secretly learning these skills for months. He knows how to predict weather changes by watching cloud formations, how to navigate by stars that are invisible to untrained eyes, and how to find water sources by reading subtle changes in vegetation patterns. This isn't amateur adventure camping. This is professional-level desert expertise. The psychological adjustment is harder than the physical challenges. You watch a tosser struggle with the concept of privacy. After spending her entire life surrounded by servants and observers, being alone with just one other person feels strange and sometimes overwhelming. She keeps expecting attendants to appear, meals to materialize without preparation, and problems to be solved by people whose job it is to anticipate her needs. But the freedom is intoxicating. You see her discover simple pleasures that were impossible in palace life, swimming naked in the oasis pool without worrying about royal dignity, eating dates straight from the tree like a child, sleeping when she's tired instead of when ceremony dictates. For the first time in her adult life, her daily schedule is determined by natural rhythms rather than imperial protocols. The nights are magical in ways that Persian palace architects could never recreate. Desert stars shine with an intensity that makes royal gemstones look dull, and the silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat. Atossa and Artabazus spend hours talking about subjects that were forbidden in court, their real opinions about imperial policies, their fears about Persian military campaigns, their dreams about lives they might have lived in different circumstances. Persian desert nights can be surprisingly cold, which provides perfect justification for sharing warmth that was impossible in their former lives. You realize they're not just escaping political constraints. They're finally able to express physical affection without fear of execution. Their romance, which had to be conducted in coded glances and brief touches, can finally develop into genuine intimacy. The practical arrangements reveal how thoroughly they've planned this escape. Artabazus has arranged for loyal servants to periodically resupply the oasis, bringing news from the outside world along with necessities they can't produce themselves. The supply system is designed to look like routine maintenance of a military outpost, which explains the expenditures without attracting suspicion. But you sense underlying tension beneath their happiness. They're living in a bubble that can't last forever. Persian search parties will eventually expand their investigations beyond grave robbers and tomb raiders. Provincial governors will notice Artabazus's prolonged absence from his administrative duties. Most importantly, they're both accustomed to lives of purpose and influence, and even paradise gets boring when you're not accomplishing anything meaningful. As the sun sets over their desert refuge, painting the sky in shades that would inspire Persian miniature painters for centuries, you watch them enjoy what might be their last completely carefree evening together. Tomorrow, reality will begin intruding on their romantic fantasy in ways that will test whether their love can survive the practical challenges of building a life outside the Persian Empire's elaborate social structure. You're back in Persepolis, watching the Persian Empire slowly realize that losing a queen might be more catastrophic than losing a battle. 3 weeks after Atossa's death, the administrative machinery of the ancient world's greatest empire is grinding toward a halt, and you're witnessing political chaos that no one anticipated. The Persian system, designed to function with divine royal couples at its center, is discovering that half a divine partnership can't maintain imperial stability. The crisis starts with something historians still argue about: the question of royal succession. Persian law required queens to produce male heirs to ensure dynastic continuity, but it also mandated complex religious ceremonies that could only be performed by living royal wives. With Atossa dead, several critical imperial rituals can't be completed, which means the gods are presumably growing increasingly unhappy with Persian imperial management. You watch Darius struggling with decisions that seem simple on the surface, but have become impossibly complicated without his queen's counsel. Persian royal marriages weren't just romantic partnerships. They were governing coalitions where kings and queens specialized in different aspects of imperial administration. Atossa handled diplomatic relations with tributary kingdoms, managed the vast network of royal women throughout the empire, and served as the final authority on religious matters affecting female subjects. Her absence is creating administrative bottlenecks throughout the Persian bureaucracy. The situation becomes more dangerous when tributary kingdoms start testing Persian resolve. You see intelligence reports flowing into Persepolis from provincial governors warning about increased rebel activity, delayed tax payments, and diplomatic messages that seem subtly less respectful than usual. Foreign kingdoms aren't directly challenging Persian power, but they're probing for weaknesses with the calculated caution of predators testing a wounded animal. Persian court officials are discovering that many imperial policies were actually joint decisions presented as royal decrees from Darius alone. Without Atossa's input, the king is reluctant to make major policy changes, which means the empire is essentially operating on autopilot during a period when active leadership is desperately needed. You watch bureaucrats accumulate stacks of documents requiring royal approval, while Darius remains paralyzed by grief and indecision. The religious implications are even more serious than the political ones. Persian Zoroastrian theology required royal couples to maintain cosmic balance through their earthly partnership, reflecting the divine marriage between Ahura Mazda and the forces of light. With the queen dead, priests are reporting disturbing omens, sacred fires that won't stay lit, sacrificial animals that display unusual behavior, and astronomical events that suggest divine disapproval of current imperial management. But here's where the situation becomes genuinely dangerous. Rival Persian noble families are interpreting the empire's instability as an opportunity for advancement. You see Gobryas, who helped orchestrate suspicions about Atossa's treason, positioning himself as the solution to the succession crisis by promoting marriage alliances between Darius and daughters from his own family. What started as paranoid palace gossip is evolving into a calculated grab for imperial power. The economic consequences are starting to ripple throughout the Persian world. Major construction projects have been suspended while the court mourns, trade agreements aren't being renewed on schedule, and the complex system of tribute collection is experiencing delays as provincial governors wait for new instructions from the capital. The Persian Empire's legendary efficiency is revealing its dependence on continuous royal oversight. Persian military commanders are the most concerned about the developing crisis. You watch them meeting in emergency sessions, discussing threats they can't address without clear royal authorization. Egyptian provinces are reporting increased Greek infiltration. Scythian tribes are testing northern borders, and Indian kingdoms are making territorial claims that require immediate diplomatic or military responses. The empire's enemies seem to sense weakness even though they don't understand its source. The psychological impact on Darius is becoming a political liability. Persian kings were expected to embody divine strength and unwavering confidence, but you see him displaying very human grief that's starting to worry even his most loyal supporters. His reluctance to appear in public, his distracted behavior during court ceremonies, and his tendency to postpone difficult decisions are creating an impression of imperial weakness that could encourage more serious challenges to Persian authority. Historians still debate whether the Persian Empire was actually as fragile as this crisis suggests, or whether Atossa's influence on imperial administration was greater than contemporary records indicate. What's clear is that her disappearance has revealed dependencies that no one anticipated. The Persian system assumed royal death would be followed immediately by remarriage and continuity of governance, not prolonged mourning that paralyzes imperial decision-making. The intelligence networks that once served Atossa are now rudderless, creating security vulnerabilities throughout the empire. You see reports of increased espionage activity from Greek agents, mysterious meetings between discontented Persian nobles, and communication breakdowns between central administration and distant provinces. The Persian Empire's famous information superiority is eroding without the Queen's personal oversight of intelligence operations. Palace servants who once served both royal households are now unemployed and potentially disloyal, creating additional security risks. Some are seeking employment with rival noble families, taking institutional knowledge about palace operations and royal routines with them. Others are leaving Persepolis entirely, spreading news about imperial instability to every corner of the ancient world through the networks that servants use to communicate across vast distances. The crisis is approaching a tipping point where temporary instability could become permanent weakness. You see foreign ambassadors reporting back to their kingdoms about Persian disorganization, provincial governors making increasingly independent decisions, and court officials beginning to position themselves for a possible change in imperial leadership. The Persian Empire has survived this long by projecting invincible strength, but that projection is becoming difficult to maintain when the capital itself is paralyzed by one woman's absence. As you watch the sun set over an empire struggling to function without its queen, you realize that Atossa's romantic escape has accidentally created the kind of political crisis that historians usually associate with foreign invasions or natural disasters. She wanted to disappear quietly with her lover, but her absence is reshaping the balance of power throughout the ancient world in ways that neither she nor Darius could have anticipated. You're riding with the most frustrated search expedition in Persian military history, watching elite imperial guards scour the countryside for tomb robbers who don't exist while the woman they're actually looking for enjoys breakfast at an oasis 100 miles away. Darius has mobilized resources that could conquer small kingdoms, and you're witnessing the magnificent incompetence of searching for the wrong crime in the wrong places for all the wrong reasons. The search commander is Artaphernes the Younger, nephew of the provincial satrap, and a military officer whose previous experience involves tracking down actual criminals rather than fictional grave robbers. You watch him struggle with an investigation that makes no logical sense. Extensive tomb damage with no signs of forced entry, missing remains but undisturbed treasure, and evidence of elaborate preparation, but no witnesses despite the tomb being under constant guard. Persian investigative techniques are actually quite sophisticated for ancient standards, combining Greek rational inquiry with Babylonian record-keeping and Egyptian forensic observation. You see them documenting everything: soil displacement patterns around the tomb, interview transcripts with every palace servant who might have observed suspicious activity, even astronomical calculations to determine whether planetary alignments might have influenced criminal behaviour. They're solving this mystery with the thoroughness of modern detectives, but they're solving the wrong mystery. The search area keeps expanding as they find no evidence of conventional tomb robbery. You follow search parties as they investigate neighbouring provinces, questioning merchants who might have purchased stolen royal artefacts, examining markets where grave goods typically appear for sale, and raiding the hideouts of known criminal organisations throughout the Persian Empire. It's the most comprehensive law enforcement operation in ancient history, pursuing leads that can't possibly produce results. Persian intelligence networks are reporting back from every corner of the empire, and the information they're gathering would fascinate modern historians if it weren't completely irrelevant to the actual situation. You see detailed reports about increased bandit activity near trade routes, suspicious gathering of nomadic tribes, and unusual movement patterns among groups that typically rob graves professionally. They're mapping criminal activity throughout the known world while their target enjoys romantic picnics in the desert. The psychological profile they've developed of the criminals is accidentally hilarious. Persian investigators have concluded they're dealing with a sophisticated international conspiracy, probably involving Egyptian tomb robbing specialists working with Greek infiltrators and supported by Scythian military advisors. The elaborate nature of the crime suggests planning that required months of preparation and coordination between multiple criminal organisations. In reality, they're hunting Roxana and a handful of loyal servants who've probably returned to normal palace duties. Darius himself has joined several search expeditions, which creates logistical nightmares for his security detail and diplomatic complications for the empire. You watch the ruler of the Persian Empire personally examining dirt piles and interrogating suspected grave robbers, behaviour that's either touching devotion to his wife's memory or alarming obsession that's interfering with imperial governance. His presence turns routine investigations into major imperial expeditions requiring extensive planning and resources. The search is producing significant intelligence about criminal activity throughout the Persian Empire, just not the intelligence they're actually seeking. You see them uncover smuggling networks, tax evasion schemes, and underground markets that have been operating beneath imperial notice for years. They're accidentally conducting the most thorough criminal investigation in Persian history while completely missing their actual target. Persian military logistics are being tested by the demands of this search operation. You watch supply trains bringing food, equipment, and reinforcements to support search parties scattered across multiple provinces. Communication networks are transmitting daily reports about investigation progress. Administrative personnel are coordinating with local authorities throughout the empire. The Persian government is functioning with impressive efficiency in service of a completely impossible mission. The political implications are starting to concern Persian court officials. Kings who personally involve themselves in criminal investigations risk appearing less regal and more desperate, especially when the investigations don't produce results. You see diplomatic messages from foreign kingdoms expressing concern about Persian imperial stability, coded language that really means they're wondering whether the empire is experiencing leadership problems that might create opportunities for territorial expansion. But here's where the situation becomes genuinely problematic. The search is starting to uncover actual criminal activity that requires attention, diverting resources from imperial governance toward law enforcement. Persian authorities are discovering corruption, rebellion, and espionage that probably should have been addressed years ago. Atossa's fake death is accidentally triggering a comprehensive review of imperial security that's revealing systemic problems throughout the Persian administrative structure. The most ironic aspect of this massive search operation is that they're actually getting close to discovering Atossa's location, just not in the way they expect. Several search parties have passed near the oasis where she's hiding, and one group actually camped within sight of her refuge while investigating reports of unusual bird migration patterns. The Persian Empire's most wanted criminals are hiding in plain sight, while imperial search parties look everywhere except where they actually are. Persian search techniques include consulting oracles, examining animal entrails, and interpreting celestial phenomena, which means they're getting divine guidance that's probably as accurate as their criminal investigation theories. You watch priests sacrifice valuable animals and analyze their organs for clues about where to search next, producing religious justification for continuing an investigation that can never succeed because its basic premises are wrong. The financial costs of this search operation are approaching the budgets of military campaigns. You see accountants calculating expenses for personnel, transportation, equipment, and the rewards being offered for information about tomb robbers. The Persian treasury is funding one of the most expensive wild goose chases in ancient history, spending enough gold to equip entire armies in pursuit of people who exist only in their imagination. As winter approaches, you watch search commanders preparing to expand their investigation into the spring campaign season. They're organizing the search for Atossa's missing remains like a military conquest, complete with seasonal planning, supply stockpiling, and recruitment of additional personnel. The Persian Empire is preparing to declare war on an enemy that doesn't exist while their former queen learns to bake bread over an open fire and wonders whether anyone will ever think to look for a living woman rather than stolen bones. You're crouched behind ancient stone markers in a moonlit cemetery outside Ctesiphon, watching Atossa and Artabazus conduct the most romantic correspondence in Persian history by carving love letters into tombstones. This clandestine communication system they've developed makes modern cryptography look simple, and you're witnessing messages that would either melt hearts or trigger international incidents, depending on who's reading them. The cemetery they've chosen for this dangerous postal service is perfect for secret communications. It's old enough that most families have forgotten which graves belong to their ancestors, remote enough to avoid casual visitors, but maintained well enough that fresh carving won't seem suspicious. Persian burial customs include regular stone maintenance by professional monument keepers, which provides perfect cover for their coded love letters, disguised as routine cemetery upkeep. Artabazus arrives first, carrying tools that make him look like a legitimate stone carver, working night shifts to avoid the heat. You watch him examine several tombstones before selecting one with enough blank space for a substantial message, then beginning to carve with the skill of someone who's been practicing this technique for months. The Persian education system apparently included more practical skills than most people realized. The code they're using is based on Persian funerary poetry, which makes it nearly impossible to detect unless you know exactly what you're looking for. Traditional Persian grave inscriptions include standardized phrases about the deceased's virtues, their family relationships, and wishes for peaceful afterlife. But Atossa and Artabazus have developed variations that transform routine funeral language into passionate personal messages. May his soul find eternal rest becomes, my heart finds no peace without you, and beloved of his family translates to, I count days until we meet again. Tonight's message from Artabazus contains information that would terrify them both if they fully understood its implications. Using their poetic code, he's reporting that Persian search parties are expanding their investigation beyond simple grave robbing. They're now looking for broader conspiracies involving foreign enemies and domestic traitors. The tomb robbery cover story that was supposed to protect them is actually making their situation more dangerous by suggesting international criminal activity. You watch Atossa approach through shadows, moving with the confident stealth of someone who's become genuinely skilled at avoiding detection. Her transformation from pampered queen to competent fugitive is remarkable. She's learned to navigate by stars, travel without leaving tracks, and blend into crowds with the expertise of professional spies. Persian royal education apparently included more survival skills than anyone expected. Her response message, carved into a neighbouring tombstone, reveals the psychological strain of their extended separation. Hidden within traditional Persian funeral poetry, she's describing loneliness, fear, and growing doubts about whether their love can survive the practical challenges of permanent exile. The romantic adventure that seems so appealing during palace planning sessions is becoming a test of endurance that's pushing both of them toward their emotional limits. But the most significant part of tonight's exchange isn't about their personal relationship. It's intelligence about political developments that could affect the entire Persian Empire. Atossa has been receiving information from loyal servants still working in the palace, and what she's learned would shock even Darius. Her death has triggered succession planning that involves eliminating potential rivals, including some of the same people who helped orchestrate suspicions about her original loyalty. Persian court politics are becoming genuinely dangerous in ways that make their original adultery seem minor by comparison. You watch Atossa carve warnings about assassination plots, military preparations for domestic conflict, and diplomatic complications with foreign kingdoms who are interpreting Persian internal instability as weakness that might be exploited through military aggression or territorial expansion. The cemetery correspondence system they've developed is actually quite sophisticated, involving multiple message drops, backup communication sites, and security protocols that would impress modern intelligence agencies. They've established timing schedules based on moon phases, recognition signals using specific flower arrangements, and emergency procedures for situations where one of them might be under surveillance or unable to reach the usual meeting locations. Tonight's exchange includes practical planning for what they're starting to realise might be permanent exile from the Persian Empire. You see them discussing potential refuge in Greek city-states, Egyptian kingdoms, or Indian territories beyond Persian influence. But each option involves complications that make their current desert hideaway seem simple by comparison. Running away for love is romantic. Building a new life in foreign kingdoms is significantly more challenging. The emotional intensity of their carved correspondence is almost painful to witness. Persian poetry includes elaborate metaphors for expressing deep feelings, and they're using this literary tradition to communicate longing that's amplified by separation, danger, and uncertainty about their future together. Their tombstone love letters are simultaneously the most romantic and most tragic documents in ancient Persian literature. But there's growing urgency in tonight's messages that suggests their time for romantic correspondence might be running out. Persian investigators are asking questions about unusual cemetery activity, monument keepers are reporting unauthorized stone carving, and the expanding search for tomb robbers is starting to include systematic examination of burial grounds throughout the empire. Their secret communication system is becoming increasingly dangerous to maintain. The final message Atossa carves tonight contains a decision that will reshape both their personal relationship and Persian imperial politics. Hidden within traditional funeral blessings for peaceful afterlife, she's telling Artabazus that she's pregnant. Their romantic escape has created biological evidence that makes permanent exile not just preferable, but absolutely necessary for survival. Persian law regarding royal adultery was harsh enough when it only involved emotional betrayal, but pregnancy proves physical relationships that carry penalties including execution for both lovers and potential civil war between their families. You realise that what started as a romantic adventure has become a life or death situation that could destabilise the entire Persian Empire if discovered. As they prepare to leave the cemetery separately, you watch them take one last look at the tombstones that have become their only means of communication. Next time they meet, it won't be for romantic correspondence. It will be to plan their permanent disappearance from Persian territory before anyone discovers that their queen's death was the beginning of a love story that's about to produce the most politically dangerous baby in ancient history. You're witnessing the most politically explosive pregnancy in ancient history as Atossa realizes that her romantic escape has created biological evidence that could trigger a civil war. 3 months into her desert exile, morning sickness isn't just an inconvenience, it's proof of adultery that carries the death penalty for both lovers and could destabilize the entire Persian succession. You're watching a love story transform into a political crisis that no one anticipated. The pregnancy changes everything about their situation in ways that make their previous problems seem simple by comparison. Persian royal bloodlines were tracked with obsessive precision, and any child born to Queen Atossa would technically be legitimate heir to the Persian throne, regardless of actual paternity. But if anyone discovers that this child was conceived during her supposed death, it becomes evidence of the most elaborate fraud ever perpetrated against the Persian Empire. You watch Artabazus struggle with the realization that he's potentially fathered the next Persian emperor while living as a fugitive in the desert. Persian law regarding royal succession is brutally clear. Legitimate heirs have claims to imperial power that supersede almost any other consideration, which means their unborn child represents either ultimate political leverage or the most dangerous secret in the ancient world, depending on how this situation develops. The practical implications of pregnancy in the desert are challenging enough without the political complications. Persian royal women typically gave birth surrounded by the finest physicians, with access to specialized medications, and in chambers designed specifically for royal deliveries. Atossa is facing childbirth in a tent. With whatever medical knowledge Artabazus acquired during military campaigns, and no possibility of calling for help if complications develop. But here's where the situation becomes genuinely terrifying. They're starting to realize that returning to Persian territory might not be optional. Royal pregnancies require extensive documentation, religious ceremonies, and official recognition that can only be performed within the Persian Empire's formal governmental structure. If they want their child to have any legitimate legal status, they need imperial acknowledgement that currently seems impossible to obtain. Persian medical understanding of pregnancy includes some surprisingly accurate knowledge, mixed with theories that would horrify modern doctors. You watch Artabazus consult scrolls he's somehow acquired about prenatal care, learning about dietary requirements, exercise recommendations, and warning signs that might indicate serious complications. He's essentially becoming an ancient Persian midwife while maintaining his cover as a provincial governor on extended military assignment. The timing couldn't be worse from a political perspective. News of Atossa's pregnancy, if it became known, would reach Persepolis just as Darius is beginning to consider remarriage to ensure imperial succession. The psychological impact of learning that his dead wife was not only alive but pregnant with another man's child would probably destroy him personally and create the kind of political chaos that foreign enemies dream about exploiting. Persian court astrologers place enormous significance on the timing and circumstances of royal births, interpreting everything from conception dates to weather patterns as divine messages about the child's destiny. A child conceived during the mother's supposed death, born in exile, and fathered by someone other than the king, would generate prophecies that could reshape Persian imperial theology in unpredictable ways. You see Atossa making practical preparations that reveal her growing understanding of how precarious their situation has become. She's learning midwifery techniques from desert nomad women, stockpiling medical supplies acquired through Artabazus's trading network contacts, and identifying potential allies who might provide refuge during and after childbirth. She's planning for scenarios that range from successful secret delivery to emergency flight to foreign kingdoms. The psychological stress is taking a toll that goes beyond normal pregnancy difficulties. You watch her struggle with the realization that she's carrying a child who will never be able to safely claim their royal birthright, and never know their legitimate father, and never experience the Persian imperial heritage that should be their destiny. She's not just hiding from her former life, she's depriving her child of an entire identity. But the pregnancy is also strengthening their relationship in unexpected ways. Persian royal marriages typically involved formal consummation ceremonies, official fertility rituals, and court supervision that made pregnancy a matter of imperial policy rather than personal joy. For the first time, Atossa is experiencing pregnancy as a private celebration shared only with someone she actually chose to love. Persian law includes provisions for royal children born under unusual circumstances, but most of those precedents involve situations like birth during military campaigns or while travelling between provinces, not birth during elaborate deception plots involving fake death and adultery with provincial governors. Their child represents a legal scenario that Persian courts have never had to address. The desert oasis is becoming inadequate for extended residence, especially with a baby coming. You watch Artabazus expanding their refuge with more substantial buildings, deeper wells, and defensive preparations that suggest they're planning for permanent settlement rather than temporary hiding. He's essentially founding a new kingdom in the middle of nowhere, population 3 and counting. The supply network that's been supporting their exile is straining under increased demands for specialized materials. Persian pregnancy requires specific foods, medicines, and textiles that can't be acquired without attracting attention from merchants who might recognize the unusual combination of luxury items being delivered to an officially uninhabited desert location. As autumn approaches, you realize they're facing an impossible choice. They can remain in hiding and risk childbirth complications that could kill both mother and child, or they can attempt to return to Persian territory and risk execution for adultery, treason, and fraud. Either option could end in disaster, but staying hidden means their child will be born stateless, while returning home means all 3 of them might not survive the political consequences. The Persian Empire, meanwhile, continues its massive search for tomb robbers, while their former queen prepares to give birth to a child who might someday have legitimate claim to the very throne their father is desperately trying to protect. You're watching the most complicated family drama in ancient history unfold against the backdrop of imperial politics that no one fully understands or controls. You're standing in the shadowed corridors of Persepolis as dawn breaks, and the impossible is about to happen. Queen Atossa, officially dead for 8 months, is about to walk back into her own palace. The servants who've been in on this elaborate charade are sweating through their robes, because nobody, not even in the Persian Empire where magic and politics dance together, comes back from the dead without consequences. You watch as Atossa adjusts the heavy veil that's become her trademark during exile. She's changed. The soft queen who once worried about protocol now moves with the calculated grace of someone who's learned to survive on wit alone. Her pregnancy is showing now, a gentle curve beneath her travelling robes that makes this resurrection both more urgent and more dangerous. Because here's the thing historians still argue about. Was this baby Darius's heir, or proof of her affair that would damn them all? The plan is audacious even by Persian standards. Atossa will claim she was kidnapped by bandits, held captive, and only now managed to escape. It's the kind of story that might work in a world where communication moves at horse speed and records can be conveniently lost. But you notice something clever in her approach. She's not returning as the same meek queen who died. This Atossa carries herself like someone who's seen the desert and survived. You follow her through the pre-dawn courtyard, past the same guards who attended her funeral. Their faces when they see her are priceless, a mixture of terror, confusion, and that peculiar relief that comes when you realise you won't be executed for failing to protect a queen who is apparently never really dead. One guard actually faints, which would be funnier if the political implications weren't so deadly serious. The reunion with Darius is electric. You're positioned behind a tapestry as she enters the royal chamber, and the king's reaction is everything. Shock, rage, joy, suspicion, all cycling across his face like weather patterns. He's been mourning her publicly, while secretly wondering if she played him for a fool. The kiss they share is passionate but calculating, each of them trying to read the other's true intentions. It's like watching two master chess players embrace while planning their next moves. But here's where it gets really interesting. Atossa doesn't just return as the grieving victim. She brings intelligence. During her captivity, she supposedly overheard bandit conversations about rebellions brewing in the eastern provinces. She has names, locations, tactical information that proves immediately useful to Darius's military advisors. You realise she's not just returning from love, she's returning as a political asset who's become more valuable dead than she ever was alive. The court physicians are summoned to examine her condition, and this is where Persian medicine gets fascinating. They don't just check her pregnancy, they're looking for signs of her miraculous survival. Atossa has prepared for this, bearing carefully crafted scars and a paleness that could suggest months of poor treatment. The lead physician, a man who probably helped stage her original death, nods gravely and confirms her story. It's medical theatre at its finest. You notice how quickly the palace adapts to this new reality. Within hours, servants are whispering that they always suspected she might have survived. The official story spreads through Persepolis like wildfire. Bandits, heroic escape, divine intervention. By afternoon, citizens are gathering outside the palace walls, calling her return a blessing from Ahura Mazda himself. The Persian propaganda machine, you realise, is remarkably efficient. The pregnancy announcement comes 3 days later, and this is where Atossa's timing proves brilliant. In a world where royal heirs are desperately needed and infant mortality is high, a pregnant queen returning from the dead reads like divine approval. The baby, she claims, was conceived just before her kidnapping, a timeline that makes Darius the father and legitimizes everything. Whether it's true becomes irrelevant next to its political usefulness, but you catch the subtle signs of ongoing deception. Late-night messengers still arrive at unusual hours. Atossa still has access to information networks that officially shouldn't exist for a recently returned captive. Her lover, you suspect, hasn't vanished. He's probably been integrated into her spy network, hidden in plain sight among the hundreds of palace servants and minor officials. The most fascinating part is watching Darius navigate his own emotions. He's genuinely relieved to have her back, but he's not stupid. He knows something doesn't add up, yet he needs the political stability her return provides. So he chooses to believe, or at least to act as if he believes. It's love tempered by statecraft, which might be the most Persian thing imaginable. You're witnessing the ripple effects of resurrection, and they're spreading far beyond the palace walls of Persepolis. Within weeks of Atossa's return, diplomatic messages are racing across the known world, because when a Persian queen comes back from the dead, every neighbouring kingdom starts recalculating their political strategies. The impossible return has become a geopolitical earthquake that will reshape how empires think about power, succession, and the very nature of royal authority. You watch as ambassadors from Babylon arrive with gifts that seem almost frantic in their generosity. They'd been quietly negotiating with Darius about potential marriage alliances, assuming he'd need a new queen. Now they're scrambling to show respect to a woman who's apparently blessed by divine forces. The Babylonian envoy keeps staring at Atossa like she might vanish again, which is honestly pretty reasonable given the circumstances. The Greek city-states are responding with characteristic skepticism mixed with genuine concern. You overhear conversations between Athenian spies who can't decide if this resurrection story represents Persian weakness, internal chaos that could be exploited, or Persian strength in the form of supernatural approval. Some Greek philosophers are apparently writing treatises about the theological implications of royal resurrection, because leave it to Greeks to turn a political scandal into a metaphysical debate. But the real political genius reveals itself in how Atossa leverages her miraculous survival. You follow her to council meetings where she's no longer just the queen consort offering gentle advice. She's now the queen who survived impossible odds, whose insights during captivity proved militarily valuable. Her voice carries weight that has nothing to do with royal bloodlines and everything to do with proven resilience. It's a masterclass in transforming scandal into political capital. The pregnancy progresses, and you notice how carefully Atossa manages the narrative around her unborn child. This isn't just an heir, this is a child conceived before divine trials, carried through impossible hardships, destined for greatness by cosmic forces. The royal astronomers are working overtime to find favourable omens surrounding the expected birth. Every unusual star alignment becomes evidence of divine approval for this miraculous family. Historians still argue whether Darius ever learned the complete truth, but you're watching him make a fascinating calculation. Truth becomes less important than stability, legitimacy, and the powerful story his empire now tells about itself. The Persians aren't just conquerors. There are people so blessed that even death cannot claim their royal women. It's propaganda that writes itself and spreads organically through every conquered territory. You notice subtle changes in palace protocol that reveal the lasting impact. Royal women now have access to security advisors, a polite term for the intelligence networks that helped orchestrate Atossa's survival. Future queens will inherit not just jewels and titles, but sophisticated systems for protecting themselves from both external threats and internal palace politics. One woman's love affair has accidentally revolutionized royal security. The economic implications are staggering. Trade routes that had been disrupted by political uncertainty during Atossa's death are now flourishing with renewed confidence. Merchants who'd been hedging their bets on Persian stability are pouring gold back into imperial ventures. The Queen's resurrection has literally made the empire richer, which might be the most practical miracle in history. Foreign kingdoms start adopting similar strategies. You hear reports of Egyptian nobles staging elaborate disappearances and returns to consolidate power. A Scythian princess apparently dies and resurrects with convenient military intelligence about her tribe's enemies. Atossa has inadvertently created a new template for political theatre that will influence royal courts for generations. The baby arrives with all the ceremony, befitting a child of prophecy, and whether or not Darius is the biological father becomes irrelevant next to the political reality. This is now the heir who survived impossible odds before even being born, the prince or princess whose very existence proves Persian divine favour. The birth celebration lasts for weeks and includes representatives from every corner of the known world. But you catch glimpses of the ongoing complexity beneath the public triumph. Late at night, when the palace settles into uneasy quiet, you sometimes see Atossa standing on her balcony, looking toward the desert where her true love might still be waiting. The woman who faked death for love now lives with the consequences of choosing empire over heart. It's a victory that tastes like sacrifice, which might be the most honest thing about this entire elaborate charade. The Persian Empire has gained a powerful queen, a legitimate heir, and a story that will echo through centuries. But Atossa has lost the simple possibility of choosing love over duty, which makes her the most successful and tragic figure in this whole impossible tale. You're standing in the royal gardens of Persepolis 20 years later, watching an older Atossa teach her children the art of survival disguised as palace etiquette. The queen who once faked her death has become the empire's most trusted advisor on matters both political and personal, but you can see in her eyes the weight of living with the most successful lie in Persian history. The child born from her resurrection, Prince Xerxes, as history will know him, has grown into a young man who embodies both the official story and its hidden complexities. You watch him practice sword work with the intensity of someone who knows his very existence was once a political gamble. Atossa has raised him to understand that power requires not just strength, but the ability to transform scandal into legend. He's learning lessons that most princes never need: how to make necessity look like destiny. The empire Atossa helped stabilize through her dramatic return has flourished beyond anyone's expectations. You observe the steady stream of ambassadors, merchants, and scholars flowing through Persepolis, all part of a Persian golden age that traces back to one woman's refusal to let death, real or fake, define her story. The trade routes hum with prosperity, the military campaigns succeed with suspicious frequency, and the royal court has become the envy of the ancient world. But historians still argue about the true cost of her choices, and you're watching that cost play out in quiet moments. Atossa has never remarried, despite Darius's death 5 years ago and numerous political advantages that a new marriage might bring. She rules as regent with competence that makes everyone forget how unusual it is for a woman to hold such power in Persia. Yet sometimes you catch her gazing toward the eastern provinces with an expression that suggests unfinished business. The love letters carved in stone that once passed between hidden lovers have become something else entirely, a secret code system that now helps coordinate intelligence across the empire. What began as romantic communication has evolved into the most sophisticated spy network in the ancient world. Atossa has transformed personal necessity into imperial advantage, turning her greatest vulnerability into the empire's greatest strength. You follow her through the palace corridors where she once walked as a frightened young queen, and the contrast is remarkable. This Atossa moves with the confidence of someone who has literally died and returned stronger. She settles disputes between provinces, mediates conflicts between generals, and advises her son on matters of state with an authority that comes from having survived impossible odds. The woman who once needed rescue has become the person everyone else turns to for salvation. The servants who helped stage her original death have become her most trusted advisors, bound together by shared secrets that would topple governments if revealed. You notice how they communicate with glances and subtle gestures refined over decades of maintaining the most important lie in Persian history. They've created a shadow government within the palace, loyal not to crown or country, but to the woman who proved that even death could be outsmarted. Prince Xerxes asks his mother about love during one of their evening walks, and you listen as Atossa gives him advice that carries the weight of lived experience. Love, she tells him, is powerful enough to move mountains and reshape empires, but remember that the greatest love sometimes requires the greatest sacrifice. It's wisdom earned through choices that still echo in the palace halls, spoken by a woman who chose empire over heart and somehow made both stronger for the decision. The Persian marriage laws have changed because of her story, creating new protections for royal women and new protocols for succession crises. Future queens will have options that Atossa never had, paths to power that don't require faking death or abandoning love. It's a legacy that extends far beyond her own dramatic story, touching women she'll never meet in kingdoms she'll never see. As sunset paints Persepolis in gold and crimson, you realize you're witnessing the end of one of history's most complex love stories. Atossa achieved everything she fought for: power, safety, influence, and the survival of her child. But the price was becoming someone who could never again choose simple happiness over complicated necessity. She saved her empire by sacrificing her heart, which might be the most Persian thing imaginable. The woman who faked her death for love ultimately chose life for duty, and in doing so created a legend that will outlast the very stones of Persepolis. Tonight, as the stars emerge over the palace where she once planned her own funeral, Queen Atossa stands as proof that sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest losses, and that the most powerful love stories are the ones that end not with happy endings, but with wisdom earned through impossible choices. The gardens grow quiet now as evening settles over ancient Persepolis. You can almost hear the whispers of history settling into the stone corridors where Atossa once walked, carrying secrets that shaped an empire. The queen who conquered death through love, who chose duty over desire, who turned scandal into legend. Her story drifts through the palace like evening mist, touching everything with the weight of choices that echo across centuries. In the gathering darkness, you might imagine you can still see her silhouette on the palace balcony, looking toward distant horizons where love once waited. The woman who proved that even queens could rewrite their own endings, who showed that the most powerful magic was simply refusing to accept impossible as final. Her legacy lives in every woman who has ever had to choose between heart and duty, between personal happiness and greater good. The Persian Empire she helped save would eventually crumble, as all empires do. The palaces would fall to dust, the trade routes would shift, the golden age would fade into memory. But the story of Queen Atossa endures, whispered through generations as proof that love can move mountains, reshape kingdoms, and sometimes, just sometimes, conquer even death itself. Rest now in the knowledge that throughout history, ordinary people have made extraordinary choices when love demanded courage. The past holds countless stories of hearts that refused to accept defeat, of clever minds that found impossible solutions, of human spirits that transformed personal struggles into lasting change. Let the ancient Persian stars watch over your dreams tonight. Let the echoes of Atossa's footsteps in palace corridors lull you towards sleep. You've earned rest now, just as she finally found peace in her impossible choices. Let the past hum quietly as you sleep, carrying you gently into dreams where love always finds a way. Sweet dreams.